In this video, I'm going to break down the top habits, top skills that you need to develop if you want to become a 1% marketer. So whether you're someone who's looking to get into the marketing space or you actually have a career and you just want to get to the next level, pay attention to this video because inside of the video, I have the keys to the kingdom. I jumped into marketing when I was 16, and my first job into marketing was at a startup company that started in a garage, and 3.5 years later, we found ourselves in a warehouse doing over $2.3 million a month in revenue. Since that time, I've held multiple marketing director and CMO level positions, from startups to e-commerce to high-end consulting brands doing over $40 million a year, to then eventually even owning my own company, an agency that scaled from zero to over $11 million in revenue in 3 years, to now CEO and co-founder of Bad Marketing, where we manage and oversee over $12 million a month in advertising spend across various social media channels, and every year being directly related to over $1 billion in generated revenue for our clients. And needless to say, throughout that time, I've had my fair share of experiences with great marketers, terrible marketers, and absolute world-class marketers. From over 500 students taking my programs and trainings to apply to their businesses and scaling their paid traffic, to managing and training in my own businesses well over 200 marketers that were employees to help manage the campaigns for our clients. And since the concept of this video is really training you how to become a 1% marketer, or what does it actually take to become a 1% marketer, it's important to know that being the right marketer or the 1% marketer in any category is always going to come down to your specific situation. Different businesses in different industries with different new customer acquisition systems or processes will require you to have different levels of skill. But what I'm talking about is, can you be the person in your niche or your industry that people come to when they need results? When someone has a question about scaling a business, or when someone's having a problem, or when they're looking for that marketer to take them to the next level, does your name actually come up? With that said, the things that we discuss in this video will ultimately cover the 3 skills that I believe are required if you want to be that world-class marketer that everyone turns to. First, let's talk about creativity, because at the end of the day, marketing is all about how do I get attention, keep attention, and ultimately, in direct response, how do I convert that attention into action, whether that's becoming a lead, buying a product, or anything like that. So when you think about creativity, especially in a world where noise or the amount of messages your consumers or market is hearing on a day-to-day basis only goes up, and the more attention spans fall, means you have to fight harder for attention than ever. And when it comes to getting attention, a lot of the times it'll come down to being creative, not just in what you're saying to the market, but how you're saying it to them. You can't just stick with top-level ideas or shallow ideas that won't really disrupt a market or get their attention. It also means thinking beyond the box, aka if a business is trying to get new customers, there's probably only a few channels that businesses are using to do that. Driving ads on social media, or sending outbound cold emails, or using organic content to try to get their market's attention. If you want to be a world-class marketer, you can't just think like them. You've got to find interesting and creative ways to find other paths and channels to get attention. Or how do you use those same channels that everyone else is using, but doing it in a very different way? A super simple example of this that we see time and time again is for e-commerce stores who are perhaps driving an ad straight to a landing page or a product description page to buy a product. This is typically what most businesses do. But there's also many successful businesses that find other ways to also get attention and convert to buyers. Example, running an ad instead of straight to a product description page, they run to an advertorial page, which creates another layer in the sales process. However, what they'll find is that running to an advertorial page increases the conversion rates once that prospect actually gets to the product description page. So instead of just going straight for the sale, they'll go straight to educating and nurturing that prospect on why that product is valuable. This is often found in health or supplement spaces where the price tag for a product in a crowded marketplace with a ton of competing products is actually expensive, meaning for someone to go from cold, meaning they just saw that ad on a news feed, to actually purchasing, they have to increase desire or deepen the pain so that by the time the prospect actually has a checkout process, they're already convinced and indoctrinated with what that brand wants inside of their head. Other cool ways to do this and just get creative is things like raffle offers, cool promotions, or even collaborations with other brands where you can get creative not just on what you're promoting, but how you're actually promoting it. Average marketers typically follow a playbook that everyone else follows. But if you want to be a 1% marketer, you've got to be the one to break that box open and find new creative ways that other brands aren't just doing every day. That's when you become the expert that businesses turn to when they want to get more customers or solve a problem, because you don't solve the problem or attempt to solve the problem like everyone else. So how do you actually get better at creativity? Well, there's 3 methods ultimately that I would prescribe. The first thing is you actually just need to review and be around more creative things, specifically in the areas that you're trying to get creative about. If you want to get better at coming up with creative ads, you need a lot more time being around and reviewing creative ads. When I'm scrolling on Instagram and I see a creative ad, all I simply do is hit the save button, and then I have a whole folder of ads that I really like and enjoy. So sometimes when I'm feeling less creative or I'm running out of ideas, I'll just pull open the folder and I'll start reviewing different ads and find one that maybe I want to mimic or I want to create an iteration of. The second thing you should really be doing if you want to get better at creative is ultimately spending more time thinking. Typically in modern day marketing world, I just see marketers go from task to task to task to task, and we spend so little time actually thinking about the ad itself. Because it's so easy to whip up an ad, publish one, and then if it doesn't work, we could kill it the next day, we don't really put much time and thought into it. Therefore, most ads I see are pretty generic and boring. Our brains are such a powerful machine that if we actually put it to work on a problem that we want it to solve, it can typically get really good at it. The problem is we don't actually spend much time thinking about how can I come up with a creative ad that would get someone's attention and that's different than what they're used to seeing. The final thing is collaboration. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own heads, in our own space, and we're in the trenches that we don't actually get out enough and talk to other people to bounce ideas off of. I can't tell you how many ads I've come up with that have done really well and were really creative and fun just because me and a group of friends or a group of my staff are sitting in a circle and we're just saying, what do we think would be really cool? What would be really crazy? One easy line that you can use in your next brainstorming meeting to get a creative and fun ad is ask the question of, what is the core benefit of this product or service? And then, what is the most extreme way that we could illustrate that benefit indirectly? Example, one of my buddies was a head of marketing for the Beard Club. Their brand was centered around making men feel like rugged men. The next question was, how do we illustrate that in the most extreme way possible? Naturally, put a lion inside of the ad.
Bearded Brothers, I'm Chris, founder of thebeardclub.com.
Simple things like this will start leading you down a path of creativity. Of course, you have budget constraints, but I like to always start what is the most extreme way and then back yourself down until you find something that's feasible for you to actually pull off. Next, let's talk about problem solving. When I'm talking about the skill of problem solving, I don't just mean in finding new ways to create a promotion or an ad. What I mean is actually developing a systematic approach and a logical, objective approach to solving problems. A lot of the times, this actually comes down to your ability to understand what the true problem actually is. Sometimes we can actually get distracted and we're trying to solve the wrong problem. To be a great problem solver, you have to account for multiple different scenarios and multiple different outcomes and plan ahead. Like playing chess. Here's an easy example. When you're running meta ads, a lot of the times we focus on CPA, which is the cost for action, whether that's a purchase or a lead. When we're trying to bring down the CPA, a lot of marketers will look at how do we bring down the cost per click. And it makes sense. Let's say, for example, to get someone to your landing page, it costs $1. So it makes sense to try to solve the problem. You would say, well, what if I can get my cost to landing page visitor to 50 cents? This would cut my CPA in half and then we're winning. However, this presupposes that all clicks are created equal and you'll be driving the same quality of person at 50 cents as you would $1. But with advertising platforms like Meta, this isn't actually true. And so if you only focus on trying to get more traffic or cheaper clicks to the website, you could actually be bringing down the quality of person to that website and actually cutting your conversion rate in half. And this is where you need to develop your problem-solving skills. Because when you're also trying to drive down click costs, you also have to say, how do we also ensure that we're getting the same quality of user? You as the marketer will need to make sure that as you're creating this new content, that you're still qualifying your market enough to try to maintain your conversion rate when they get to the landing page. Or you'll need to look for other solutions like, can we do anything on the landing page to actually increase the conversion rate without changing the ads themselves? You're not always going to hit a home run every single time. But if you want to develop great problem-solving skills, you have to use the and then what method. The and then what method is my process for planning ahead. If I make this change and I see this happen, then what? But if I see this happen, then what? If you start asking yourself the then what method over and over again, you're going to get very good at thinking strategically and problem solving, because you're not going to just think about the first or second order consequence. This is the concept of, if I make an action, what is the result? But then what is the result of that action? The further down the line you can start considering and thinking of different outcomes that perhaps could be possible, the better you'll become at planning against those outcomes, and then either finding problems you weren't thinking about originally, or you'll get very good at adaptation and you'll be able to adjust quickly to achieve the target. Now let's talk about leverage, which is ultimately the third and final skill that I really think you need to develop to become a world-class marketer. When I say leverage, I mean this in a few different ways. One, it's how can you make the biggest impact with the least amount of work? This is the whole small hinges swing big doors concept. If you want to be a world-class marketer, it's the ability to look at a business, look at their operations, look at their process and their current marketing efforts, and find the one or two things that you can switch quickly that will have a drastic impact on their outcomes. Now, I will say, to be able to do this type of action often comes from experience. However, it doesn't necessarily always have to be your experience. Charlie Munger once said he'd rather learn vicariously through the hardships and failures of others. The more time you can spend reviewing and analyzing what other people are doing, whether in their marketing campaigns that won or failed, that is actually experience you're inheriting from them. So many people think that you have to have been in the game a very long time to get good at this, but that's actually not true. It does require a lot of intentional time of you reviewing what others have done and are doing. A super simple example of this is when I jumped into a business and their application costs had doubled from what it used to be. Their process was watch a VSL, book a call, then get on a closer call, and then ultimately they'd get the sale. When we jumped into the business, we started reviewing the whole process even after the VSL, and we noticed that the application was about 12 to 15 questions. And we were noticing a very high drop-off rate of the people who started the application versus the people who finished. We made two simple moves and increased that business's revenue by 30% in a month. The first one was we reduced the friction on the application. We got with the sales team and figured out what questions were actually important to them and which ones were just fluff. We reduced the number of questions on the application down to about 8 questions that still gave the sales team the questions they needed to know before the prospect showed up to the sales call. The next thing we did was simply have the sales team call the prospects once they filled out an application and booked a call to confirm that they were going to show up to that call, and they did a little pre-qualification. This not only increased the show rate to those sales calls from 40% to 70%, but this also allowed the sales team to cancel applications that were no longer qualified after they've had the quick conversation with that prospect. This kept the sales calendars open for more qualified calls to actually book. When you have the ability to use leverage, meaning make a few small tweaks to the business, and you had the right problem-solving skill to figure out what key points of leverage that actually was, this allows us to make a few quick changes, but has a dramatic impact on the business itself. The next category of leverage is tools and software. Ultimately, when I say leverage, I mean how do you do more with less required labor from you? See, leverage is the simple concept of how do I reduce the amount of force required from me, but increase the amount of output or impact I'm actually driving. And when it comes to marketing, your ability to use tools of tracking and attribution, using data analytics tools, using creative development tools, and in this world, AI, when you can use those levels of tools to increase your leverage and impact on the business, you absolutely start to become a 1% marketer. Because other people who don't use tools or softwares or things to increase their leverage, their output is limited. They have only a finite amount of time and effort that they can do if they're not leveraging other things to do some of that work for them. And if we're talking about 2024 and beyond, your ability to use AI is probably one of the single most important sources of leverage that you can get good at. Now, the difference is everyone in the marketing space has access to AI. Your key and the leverage will come from how you use AI and your proficiency at using AI. That will give you the competitive advantage over your competitors, but also help you drive better impact for your clients. If you're just getting started into digital marketing, the best advice I have for you is to look to the future. What do you believe the future of marketing and digital advertising will look like? And start developing skills to position yourself for that, because that future is going to come much quicker than you think. If you try to jump in now and do what other people are doing now, but they've been doing it for the past 3 years, you really don't stand a chance. So if you're coming into it now now, or you want to figure out how to position yourself best for the future, just spend time developing the skills you think will be needed in the future, and you'll already be ahead of the game. So this begs the question, what should you be doing right now? What habits should you really be cultivating if you want to become a 1% marketer? There's really two habits you really need to ingrain in yourself right now. The first thing is when you're working on an account or a marketing campaign, be obsessive about the numbers daily, if not multiple times a day. Don't just look at the numbers, memorize them, ingrain them into your brain. Because the 1% marketers that I've worked with, or the things that clients have said to me that they've really loved about me compared to the other people they've worked with, is that I was always on it. I knew exactly where we were from a data perspective. I knew exactly what shifts or percentage on pace or off pace that we were. I knew the numbers. Don't just depend on a spreadsheet to tell you your numbers. And so anytime someone asks you a question, you need to go pull up that same spreadsheet. Understand the numbers so deeply that any given time you have a pulse of where you're currently at. The second thing is, be so curious. Be constantly curious at why things are working or why they're not. When you see a result or when you see a KPI, ask yourself the question of why is it there, whether it's positive or negative. But you've got to develop your mind to consistently understand or want to understand why something is the way it is. Why did they create that ad that way? Why did they price their products here? Why do they have their creative static images laid out like this versus this? Why did they launch that campaign or promotion? I wonder if they're on a slow season. The more questions that you can start asking, the more data you'll be able to synthesize and understand. But more than anything, this is where you start to learn and develop those skills and experience vicariously through other things. Whether that's a competitor, whether that's your ads or your campaigns, the more questions you ask, the better your brain is going to be at solving them, but also holding that data and learnings in storage in your mind for the next time you need it. Now, with any career or skill you're trying to develop, the mentality you have is going to play a big role in your actual achievement of success. The first thing is you've got to develop some mental toughness. I don't mean you need to become a robot and never have emotions, but what I do mean is that realistically in marketing, you're going to face failure over and over again. You're going to have months where it just seems like everything you do or try doesn't seem to work. You're going to have clients that are mad at you or blaming you for the results when you don't feel like you had a control over them in the first place. But to be a great marketer, you need to learn how to push through those emotions and keep focused on what the goal and the task is. Understanding that failure is just a part of the process and just a part of the career you chose, you need to be able to learn how do I remove all of this emotional pressure I'm facing so that I can focus on solving the right problem and solving it the right way. This will really help if you can learn to just focus on data. What does data actually tell you to do? We don't make decisions based on gut or just emotion. We need to see the data so that we can make a proper decision. The next mentality you need is a student's mentality. Understanding because we're in this industry and it's changing all the time, there's always going to be new things you need to learn and adapt to. Many marketers will start in hot, do really well, and then die off and you never hear from them again simply because they stopped learning and they just stick to the same tactics or methods that they've been using for years. But no method really will stick around forever, and therefore if you don't adapt with the changes or stay with the times, you'll get left behind. This relates back to the habit of being curious, always asking questions. How can I do better? And assuming that there's still much I have to learn. Because whether you understand marketing really well or not, the modalities or the tactics that you implement that marketing with will change. The final thing, and this is true for any career, but it's confidence. You have to have confidence in yourself that even if you didn't figure it out this time, you will next time or the time after that. Realistically, there is no problem that you can't solve if you're given enough time. You have to develop this confidence because if you don't, the moment you start slipping in your self-confidence, it's the moment you start becoming less creative, less skilled at solving problems, and not having the energy to use the leverage around you. You have to maintain confidence and believe in yourself that you can solve it and that you will solve it. That just because you had a failure last month doesn't mean that you're a failure, and it doesn't mean that you're going to fail this month. I often have to remind myself that there's really nothing I can't solve, and man, I'm actually grateful because it's been a while since I've had a good problem. I know that when I put my mind to something, there's really nothing I can't solve. And so I have to dive back in because while it might have won the first round, I'm in it again the second round and it better bring the pain. When it comes to developing your mentality, you need mental toughness, maintaining a student spirit, and overall confidence. At all times, maintain confidence. So now that we've discussed and gone over the top skills you really need to master to become the top 1%, there's still a gap here. It's important to keep in mind to become the top 1%, to become the person that everyone looks to when they need something solved or when they want help. It still requires some level of awareness to you, because you could be doing all of these habits and no one really knowing about you. So what is that thing that separates from no one knowing about you to now all of a sudden everyone wanting to work with you? Well, ultimately, after my review of some of the most successful business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and marketers in the world, there is still that one key moment that most of them talk about that changed their life forever. And it either came down to an opportunity that came across their desk or someone that they met that catapulted them into the stratosphere. And so a lot of people really ask, man, where is my opportunity? Where is that person that will help take me to that next level? Ultimately, I found that if you wait long enough, this opportunity or this person always comes around. The difference is most people quit before they ever get that situation happening to them. That person that you look up to, if you look back at their career, they had a season, whether that was 1 year or a decade or 2 decades, or maybe even 3 decades, where no one knew about them. But they were practicing these habits. They were doing them consistently and they were doing them with excellence. And then one day that opportunity came. If you want to be that 1% marketer, that person that everyone knows about, often I tell people the secret to that success isn't even always being better. Sometimes you just have to outlast them. If you truly want the outcome of being that 1%, then you've got to be willing to carry the stones that will be required for you to actually build the vision you want. You've got to be able to stick with it. And this takes time. But maybe now you're curious about what were those opportunities they got or the people they met to take them to that next level. If so, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because in my next video, I'm going to break down some of the top marketers to ever walk the earth and what were the opportunities and things they did to actually achieve their level of success. So be on the watch for that video. But in the meantime, start implementing these habits and practices to develop your skills, and you'll be on your path to becoming a top 1% marketer.